Little Oliver was just 7 years old, but he had already faced more challenges than most people do in a lifetime. He had been battling leukemia for the past 2 years, spending more time in hospitals than at home. Yet, despite his illness, Oliver was always full of dreams and excitement. One of his biggest dreams was to see the royal guards at Buckingham Palace. He had watched countless videos of them on the internet, fascinated by their tall black hats, bright red coats, and how they stood so still no matter what happened around them. To him, they looked like real-life heroes, strong and unshakable. Oliver's parents knew how much this meant to him. They had seen the way his eyes lit up every time he talked about the guards. Wanting to bring him joy, they reached out to a charity that helped children with serious illnesses fulfill their wishes. To their delight, the charity arranged a special trip to London for Oliver and his family. It was a dream come true for the little boy. On the morning of their trip, Oliver was more excited than he had been in a long time. He wore a tiny replica of the Royal Guard's uniform that his parents had specially ordered for him. It was a little big for him, but he loved it. "Do I look like a real guard, Mommy?" he asked, twirling around in front of the mirror. His mother smiled and kissed his forehead. "You look even better than a real one, sweetheart." The journey to London was full of joy. Oliver kept looking out of the car window, pointing at different sights and asking questions about the city. His parents answered every question, happy to see him so excited. When they finally reached Buckingham Palace, Oliver gasped in amazement. The grand gates, the beautiful architecture, and most of all, the sight of the royal guard standing tall and still. It was everything he had imagined and more. Holding his father's hand, Oliver walked closer to the palace, his small face filled with wonder. "They're so cool," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the guards. "I wonder if they ever get tired standing like that." His father chuckled. "Maybe, but they are trained to stay still no matter what." Oliver admired their discipline even more now. He tried to stand just as still as they did, but within seconds he giggled and moved. "It's so hard," he said. As they waited for the famous changing of the guard ceremony to begin, Oliver started to feel a little tired. His illness made him weak sometimes, but he didn't want to miss a single moment. He squeezed his mother's hand for support, his breathing a little heavier than before. His parents kept a close eye on him, making sure he was okay. Then, just as the ceremony was about to start, Oliver suddenly felt dizzy. His vision blurred, and before he could say anything, his legs gave way. Right there, in front of the royal guards, Oliver fainted. Oliver's parents panicked as they saw their little boy collapse right in front of them. His tiny body fell gently to the ground, his face pale. His mother let out a gasp and quickly bent down, calling his name in a shaky voice. His father was already reaching for him, trying to lift him up. People around them turned their heads, whispering in concern. Some stepped forward, wanting to help, while others just stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Right at that moment, something unexpected happened. One of the royal guards, a tall soldier with a strong presence, suddenly moved. The guards were known for their discipline, for standing still no matter what happened around them. But this soldier didn't hesitate for even a second. He took a step forward, breaking his strict stance, and kneeled beside Oliver. His serious face softened as he looked down at the unconscious boy. Oliver's little hands were still clutching the sides of his tiny uniform. His chest rose and fell in weak breaths. The guard's voice was calm but firm as he called out, "Someone get help." His deep voice carried through the air, and within moments, another soldier quickly signaled for medical assistance. Oliver's mother was in tears, gently patting his face, trying to wake him up. "Oliver, sweetheart, open your eyes," she whispered. His father held onto his small hand, his fingers trembling. The royal guard, still kneeling beside them, looked at Oliver carefully. Even though he was trained to be strong and disciplined, he was also human. And at this moment, he wasn't just a soldier, he was someone who cared. A few tourists stepped back, giving space for Oliver's parents and the guard. Some took out their phones, capturing the rare moment of a royal guardsman breaking his strict duty to help a child. Others simply watched, holding their breath. It was an unusual sight, one that no one expected to see that day. After a few seconds that felt like an eternity, Oliver's eyelids fluttered. A small sound escaped his lips as he slowly opened his eyes. His mother let out a relieved sob, and his father squeezed his hand gently. Oliver blinked in confusion, looking around at the worried faces staring at him. Then his gaze landed on the soldier kneeling beside him. The boy's lips parted slightly. He recognized the uniform, the tall hat now resting beside the guard's knee. His tired eyes widened just a little. You moved," he whispered weakly. His voice was barely above a breath, but the soldier heard him. A small, almost invisible smile tugged at the corner of the guard's lips. "Yes," the soldier answered softly, "but only for you." Oliver's mother let out a small laugh between her tears, and even a few people in the crowd smiled through their concern. The sound of approaching footsteps signaled that medical help had arrived, but in that moment, something special had already happened. A royal guard had broken protocol, not for an emergency, not for a royal order, but for a little boy with a dream. The paramedics rushed through the crowd, carrying their medical kits as they made their way to Oliver. His mother quickly moved aside, but held onto his little hand tightly, not wanting to let go. His father helped lift him slightly so the paramedics could check his condition. Even though Oliver was awake, he still looked pale and weak. His breathing was slow, and his small body felt tired. The royal guard who had broken his stance remained kneeling beside the family. His tall black hat was still placed on the ground, something no one had ever seen a guardsman do in public. His serious face showed concern as he watched the paramedics examine Oliver. One of them took out a small flashlight and gently shined it in Oliver's eyes. "Can you tell me your name, little one?" the medic asked with a kind smile. Oliver blinked a few times before answering in a soft voice, "Oliver." His mother squeezed his hand encouragingly. The medic nodded and checked his pulse. "He seems exhausted. Might be dehydration or just too much excitement," he said, looking at Oliver's parents. "Has he eaten or had enough water today?" His mother nodded quickly. "Yes, we made sure he had breakfast. He was just really excited about today. He's been waiting so long to see the guards." She looked over at the guardsman beside them, her eyes still filled with emotion. "And now, one of them is right here with him." Oliver's weak gaze slowly turned toward the soldier again. Even in his tired state, he still couldn't believe what had happened. "You really moved for me," he whispered. His small voice carried so much wonder that even a few people in the crowd smiled, touched by the moment. The guard, whose uniform was still perfectly neat despite kneeling on the ground, nodded slightly. "Yes, I did," he replied in a deep but gentle voice. "Because you needed help." Oliver tried to smile, but his energy was too low. His fingers curled slightly around his mother's hand as he looked at the guard again. "You're my favorite guard," he whispered, and his eyes slowly closed again. Though he was still conscious, his mother let out a soft chuckle, brushing his hair gently. The paramedics finished their checkup and turned to Oliver's parents. "He's stable, but he needs to rest. We recommend taking him to a hospital for a full checkup, just to be sure." Oliver's father nodded. "Yes, of course. We'll do whatever is needed." He carefully picked up Oliver, holding him close. The boy's head rested against his father's shoulder, his tiny hands still weakly gripping his own little uniform. Before they left, Oliver's mother turned to the guard. Her eyes were full of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know this probably isn't something you're allowed to do, but it means everything to him." The guard gave a small nod, his expression unreadable yet filled with silent understanding. As Oliver's family moved toward the ambulance, the crowd slowly parted, whispering about what they had just witnessed. But for Oliver, one thing was clear: his dream had come true in a way he never expected. As the ambulance doors closed, Oliver's parents sat beside him, watching over him with worried yet loving eyes. The paramedics reassured them that he was stable, but he needed rest. Oliver, though weak, felt a strange sense of happiness inside him. He still couldn't believe that a real royal guard had moved just to help him. It was something he never thought would happen. The journey to the hospital was quiet. Oliver's mother gently stroked his hair, while his father held his small hand, making sure he felt safe. Oliver's eyelids fluttered open for a moment, and he whispered, "Will I see the guards again?" His mother smiled warmly. "Of course, sweetheart. You'll get better, and we'll come back. Maybe next time, you can even meet them properly." At the hospital, doctors ran a few tests to make sure Oliver was okay. His condition was stable, but they wanted him to stay overnight for observation. His parents stayed by his side, never letting go of his hand. Despite everything, Oliver still had that tiny smile on his face. His mind kept replaying the moment when the guard knelt beside him. He had watched so many videos about them, learning how they never moved, no matter what. But today, one of them had made an exception, just for him. Meanwhile, back at Buckingham Palace, something unusual was happening. The royal guards rarely spoke about their duties in public, but today's event had spread quickly among them. The soldier who had helped Oliver, Corporal James Thornton, stood in the barracks, his fellow guards looking at him with admiration. "You really did that?" one of them asked, breaking the usual silence. James nodded, his face serious. The boy needed help. There was no other choice. Another guard smirked slightly. "Well, you just became famous, mate. People were taking pictures and recording. I wouldn't be surprised if this is all over the news soon." James didn't care about fame. He wasn't thinking about breaking protocol or what people would say. All he cared about was the little boy in the hospital, hoping he was okay. He didn't know why, but something about Oliver had touched his heart. Maybe it was the way he had admired the guards so much, or how his tiny uniform looked so much like theirs. Or maybe it was just because, in that moment, he wasn't a soldier. He was simply a human being helping a child in need. Later that evening, as Oliver lay in his hospital bed, he looked up at the ceiling, feeling tired but happy. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain: this was a day he would never forget. And little did he know, his story was already spreading far and wide, touching hearts across the world. The next morning, Oliver slowly opened his eyes. Sunlight streamed through the hospital window, filling the room with warmth. His mother was sitting beside him, gently holding his hand, while his father stood near the window, talking to a doctor. Oliver felt a little better, though his body was still weak. He blinked a few times before whispering, "Mom." His mother turned to him instantly, her face lighting up with relief. "Oh, sweetheart, you're awake. How are you feeling?" she asked, brushing his hair softly. Oliver gave a small smile. "Tired, but okay." Then, as if remembering something important, his eyes widened slightly. "The guard, the one who helped me, is he okay?" His mother chuckled softly, wiping a tear from her eye. "He's perfectly fine, my love. And do you know what? People all over the world are talking about what he did for you." Oliver looked confused. "They are?" His father walked over, smiling. "Yes, buddy. Someone in the crowd recorded the moment when the guard helped you, and now the video has gone viral. It's everywhere, on the news, on the internet. People are touched by his kindness." Oliver felt warmth spread through his heart. He never expected that his special moment would be seen by so many people. "Does he know?" he asked. His father nodded. "I'm sure he does. And actually," he paused, exchanging a quick glance with Oliver's mother, "there's something else. Someone very special heard about what happened and wants to meet you." Oliver tilted his head in curiosity. "Who?" His mother smiled mysteriously. "You'll see soon, sweetheart." A few hours later, there was a gentle knock on the hospital room door. Oliver's heart raced with excitement as his mother called, "Come in." The door slowly opened, and standing there, still in his perfectly neat red uniform, was the royal guard who had saved him, Corporal James Thornton. Oliver's eyes widened in surprise. He gasped softly, "It's you." The guard gave a small nod, stepping forward, but this time, he wasn't holding back a smile. He was carrying something in his hands, a royal guardsman's cap, carefully wrapped in a small, elegant box. He walked up to Oliver's bedside and gently placed the box on his lap. "This is for you," James said in his deep but kind voice. "A little gift from the royal guards." Oliver's tiny fingers shook as he opened the box. Inside was an official cap, signed by the guards at Buckingham Palace. His eyes filled with tears of happiness. "For me," he whispered in disbelief. James nodded. "You're braver than most soldiers I know, Oliver. We wanted you to have something special." Oliver's parents wiped away tears, overwhelmed by the kindness of this moment. Oliver held the cap close to his chest, his heart full. He never thought his dream could get any better, but today it had. Oliver couldn't stop staring at the royal guard's cap in his hands. It felt soft yet firm, and the golden emblem on the front shone brightly under the hospital lights. He carefully traced the letters of the signatures inside, feeling like he was holding something truly special. His heart swelled with happiness. He had always admired the royal guards, but never in his wildest dreams had he imagined receiving such a gift from them. Looking up, Oliver met Corporal James Thornton's gaze. The guard, who once seemed so serious and unshakable, now had warmth in his eyes. Oliver swallowed the lump in his throat and whispered, "Thank you." James gave a small nod. "You're welcome, Oliver." He then glanced at Oliver's parents. "I wanted to visit and make sure he was feeling better. We were all worried about him after yesterday." Oliver's mother wiped a tear from her cheek. "That's so kind of you. He's still weak, but he's much better now." James turned back to Oliver. "I saw in the video how much you love the royal guards. Is that true?" Oliver's eyes lit up. "Yes, I watch videos about you all the time. I love how you stand so strong and never move. It's like you're real-life superheroes." James chuckled softly. "Well, we're not exactly superheroes, but we do train hard to stand tall and protect the palace. But yesterday I had to move because I knew a real hero needed help." Oliver's mouth parted slightly. "A real hero?" James nodded. "Yes, you." Oliver's parents smiled as the little boy blinked in shock. "Me? But I'm just a kid." James kneeled beside the bed, just like he had kneeled beside Oliver at Buckingham Palace. "You're not just any kid, Oliver. You've been fighting a battle every day with more strength and courage than most people ever will. That makes you a hero in my book." Oliver felt his mother squeeze his hand gently. His father smiled proudly. A warm feeling spread through his chest. He had always looked up to the royal guards for being strong and brave. But now, one of them was calling him brave. A soft knock on the door made everyone turn their heads. A nurse peeked inside with a bright smile. "Oliver, dear, you have another visitor." Oliver's eyes widened as a man in a suit stepped in. He was an official from Buckingham Palace. "Hello, Oliver," he greeted warmly. "We heard about your love for the royal guards, and after everything that happened, we'd like to invite you for a special visit when you're feeling better. You will get to see the guards up close, meet them properly, and even tour the palace." Oliver's jaw dropped. "Really?" The man chuckled. "Really?" Oliver looked at his parents, then at James, then back at the man. His face lit up with pure joy. This was turning into the best day of his life. Oliver couldn't believe his ears. A special visit to see the royal guards up close. A tour of Buckingham Palace. It felt like a dream, one he never imagined would come true. His heart raced with excitement, and for the first time in a long while, he forgot about feeling weak. His mother placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. But first, you need to rest and get strong again." Oliver nodded eagerly. I will. I'll eat all my food, drink lots of water, and listen to the doctors. I have to get better for the visit. Corporal James Thornton smiled at the boy's enthusiasm. That's the spirit, soldier. He gave Oliver a playful salute, and without hesitation, Oliver lifted his hand and saluted back. The moment made everyone in the room smile. The man from Buckingham Palace stepped forward and handed Oliver's parents an envelope. Inside, you'll find all the details. When Oliver is feeling well enough, just let us know, and we'll make all the arrangements. Oliver's father shook his hand warmly. Thank you. This means the world to him. Oliver looked down at the Royal Guard's cap still resting on his lap. He held it close, feeling its weight, not just in his hands but in his heart. He had always thought of the Royal Guards as distant figures, standing tall and untouchable. But now, they felt like friends, people who truly cared about him. As James stood up to leave, Oliver quickly spoke. Wait. The guard turned back. Yes. Oliver's voice was small but filled with emotion. Will you be there when I visit? James hesitated for a second, then gave a firm nod. I'll make sure of it. Oliver beamed. He had gained not just an unforgettable experience, but a real connection with someone he admired. The rest of the day passed in excitement. Nurses, doctors, and hospital staff who had seen the news came to congratulate Oliver. Some even asked for pictures with him, calling him an inspiration. The little boy couldn't believe how much attention he was getting. But to him, the best part of the whole experience wasn't the fame. It was the kindness he had received from the Royal Guard. Later that night, as Oliver lay in his hospital bed, he looked up at the ceiling with a peaceful smile. His heart was full. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, I can't wait. With that thought, he drifted into a deep, restful sleep, dreaming of the day he would walk through the grand gates of Buckingham Palace, not just as a visitor, but as someone the guards would always remember. A few weeks later, after Oliver had recovered and regained his strength, the long-awaited day finally arrived. His parents had been carefully planning everything, and Oliver couldn't contain his excitement. He had made sure to eat all his meals, follow the doctor's orders, and drink plenty of water. Every day, he felt stronger, and now, the day he had dreamed about was right in front of him. Early that morning, Oliver woke up with a rush of energy. His parents helped him dress in his best clothes, a small suit that made him look sharp and ready for his special visit. He looked at himself in the mirror and smiled at the reflection. This was going to be the best day of his life. His parents drove him to the meeting spot, a few blocks away from Buckingham Palace. The closer they got, the more Oliver's heart raced. His mind was filled with thoughts of meeting the Royal Guards, of seeing the Grand Palace up close, and most of all, of seeing Corporal James Thornton again, the kind guard who had saved him when he needed it most. When they arrived, there was a large crowd of people standing around the gates, waiting for their turn to go in for tours. But Oliver was taken through a different entrance, one marked with special signs that said VIP. As they walked past the grand gates, Oliver looked around in awe. The beautiful gardens stretched out in front of him, and the palace loomed large and magnificent. It was just as he had imagined, and even more impressive in person. They were greeted by the same man from Buckingham Palace, who smiled warmly at them. Welcome, Oliver. We're so happy you could make it today. Oliver smiled shyly, still in awe of everything. Thank you. This is amazing. The man motioned for them to follow, and they were led into the heart of the palace. Everything was grand, ornate hallways, elegant rooms, and portraits of royalty from centuries ago. But what Oliver was most excited about was the moment when they reached the guardroom. As they entered, Oliver's eyes went wide. There, standing tall and proud, were the royal guards in their red uniforms and tall black hats. They were exactly how he had seen them in the videos, and he felt a rush of pride. Oliver, we have something very special for you, the man said with a smile. Just as he spoke, A familiar face appeared. Corporal James Thornton. He stepped forward, his uniform neat as always. "Well, well, Oliver," he said with a grin. "I see you made it here just fine." Oliver's face lit up. "I can't believe I'm really here, and you're here too." James chuckled softly. "You earned it, Oliver. You've got the heart of a true royal guard." Oliver stood up straighter at the compliment, feeling more proud than ever. He was surrounded by the guards now, and for a moment, he felt like part of something bigger, something important. The rest of the visit was everything Oliver had hoped for. He walked through the palace with his family and the guards, learning about the history and the royal duties. He even got a chance to try on a small version of the guard's hat and pose for pictures, just like he'd always imagined. At the end of the day, Oliver couldn't stop smiling. He had seen the palace, met the royal guards, and most importantly, he had made a lasting connection with a real hero who would always remember him. As they were about to leave, Corporal James Thornton bent down one last time. "Oliver," he said softly, "keep being brave, and remember, you're always welcome at Buckingham Palace." Oliver nodded, his heart full. "Thank you. I'll never forget this." As they walked out of the palace, hand in hand, Oliver looked up at his parents with shining eyes. "This was the best day ever," he said. And in that moment, surrounded by love and support, Oliver knew that no matter what happened next, he would always carry this day with him, forever.